welcome back to my channel. I'm starting a new project. I'm gonna rearrange my library. Wish me luck. All right, so to start things off, I'm sure some of you guys have seen what my home library looked like prior to this extravagant change that I went through. You can kind of see it here, right? Obviously, it's a little different in person, but it is what it is. We've all seen on the internet, especially YouTube, all of the Billy bookcase hacks where people take bookcases from IKEA and they build them out to make them look like they are built-in bookshelves. It's basically a cost-effective way of having that dream library. So that is exactly what I did. So to begin the process, I bought all of my Billy bookcases. In this case, I bought 6 of the wider bookcases and 1 of the skinny bookcases because I needed that corner piece. I also bought bookshelf extenders for each one of the cases. My ceilings are 9 feet tall and I wanted them to go all the way up to the ceiling. So I bought 2 extenders per bookcase to make it up to the 9 feet. There was about an inch and a half gap at the ceiling, which allowed me to actually install the bookcases without scraping my ceiling, which was beneficial. So over the past few videos of my channel, you've been able to kind of see the progression on the purchasing of the Billies. But you'll also notice that they don't look the prettiest. Even though they're floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, they do not look the prettiest. Now, just to be aware, I did buy the white ones because they are the cheapest, and they are the most readily in stock. Trying to buy these bookcases at my IKEA is ridiculous. I am in like the 4th largest city in the US, and we have one IKEA. So they sell out pretty quickly. But I was able to eventually purchase all of the items that I needed from IKEA to create this hack. But you're gonna notice that they don't look pretty and they're kind of not lined up. So as much as IKEA tries to make things as even as possible, there are some differences when you build them. Now, it could be that I tightened something too quickly or that the manufacturing was just a little off. I honestly couldn't tell you, but not all the shelves lined up the way they were supposed to. So it was necessary for me to make sure that the bookcases were properly installed onto the wall, but also installed to each other. So the first step in the process for attaching the bookshelves to each other is I got 1.5 inches. I would highly recommend 1.25 inches. I just could not find them at my Home Depot or my Lowe's. A 6 gauge is important. 6 gauge, 1.25 inch wood screws. Those screws fit perfectly into the pre-drill holes that are already in the Billies for the shelves. So you're not having to worry about making extra holes or pre-drilling or anything like that. They're already there, and it'll attach the 2 bookcases together securely. Now, the reason I say get the 1.25 inch instead of the 1.5 inch, the space between the 2 Billy bookshelves is exactly 1.5 inches. So I did have a bit of push through on the other side from the tip of the screw that I had to cover with wood filler. It's not ideal. 1.25 inches would get the job done just as well, except you wouldn't have to worry about that tip sticking out the other end of the hole. Once the bookshelves were all installed together and they were structurally attached to the wall themselves, we used the brackets that came with the Billies to secure them to the wall. When buying the Billy extenders, there is actually a gap at the bottom of the extender on the back side to allow for that bracket to be there. So what we did is we took the original shelves, attached them to studs with that, using that bracket, and then once you place the extender on top, it actually leaves like a gap enough for that space so that you don't have to worry about your extenders being all wonky or anything like that. The next step in the process, once everything was secured, is to start framing it out to make it look like they are built in and not $70 shelves from IKEA. So for the trim, I got 1.25 inch wide, but only about, I think, like a 1/2 inch thick trim. Trim itself wasn't very expensive. I think it was like $8 a piece because it is PVC. And then I just used a miter box to cut it. The miter box was not expensive at all. I see a lot of people like do these Billy hacks and they have, you know, miter saws, like electric miter saws. That was not my budget. I am not a general DIYer. So I bought a $15 miter box and it worked just fine. Okay, the next thing I did was I cut my crown molding. So I also got PVC crown molding. It was a lot cheaper than getting wood crown molding. And to be honest with you, my house was built in 2024. Like, if I had a historic home or something where I wanted to retain like the craftsmanship of it, I would have splurged for better crown molding. But my house was built like 9 months ago, and I'm pretty sure they used like construction adhesive and popsicle sticks to build it. So I wasn't really too worried about going along with, you know, the integrity of the craftsmanship. I bought PVC molding because it was cheaper. So I got the PVC crown molding, we installed it onto the ceiling. I did have to seam it, which bothers me because I can see the seams in certain parts because they did not have pieces long enough, but it's okay. It's still, you can, for the most part, hide it fairly well with caulking and paint and all of that kind of stuff. I framed out the crown molding. I cut it using my $15 miter box and I installed it. We used finishing nails. Again, I didn't buy a nail gun. That was unnecessary. I already had a hammer and I bought some finishing nails for like $4 and they work just fine. So I installed my crown molding. After the crown molding was installed, I then installed my molding pieces. Now we had measured from the crown moldings to the floor to cut the finishing trim pieces. You don't want to put the finishing trim on first because most likely your crown molding is going to hang down a little bit from your ceiling depending on how much of a gap you leave. Again, I only had an 1.5 inch gap, but I had 2.5 inch crown molding. So there was a bit of an overlay. So I didn't want to measure my trim based off of just the height of the bookshelves. I wanted to measure it of the height of the bookshelves below the crown molding, because if you try and set the crown molding on top of the trim, it's just gonna create an issue. So do that after you have your crown molding up. So to install the trim, I used Gorilla Glue construction adhesive and we just zigzagged some over the front, the seams where the two bookshelves met, and put them up, held them in place with some blue painter's tape until they dried. It was a pretty easy process, to be honest with you. I could have used nails, but the material is so thin that I would have had to put them dead center, and if I put them dead center, the nails would have ended up in the space between the two bookshelves anyways, so it seemed kind of pointless. But the Gorilla Glue construction adhesive worked amazing. The reason that I got 1.25 inch trim instead of 1.5 inch trim is because of the space for the corner piece of the IKEA shelves. So that space is thinner than 1.5 inches. So if I had gotten an 1.5 inch piece, it would have actually gone over, but that space was basically 1.25 inches. So that's why I got that instead of the full 1.5 inches. So I put them over all of the seams. I also put a piece of molding on each end of the bookshelves to kind of finish it off and make it look pretty. Now, there is a bit of a hangover, but it's okay. It still looks really, really good. And a lot of bookcases do that, where they have a bit of a hangover on a trim on the outside. So it wasn't a big deal for me. The next step in the process, after everything dries, because you do want to give it some time to dry, make sure everything is cured properly. So once everything was dry, the next step was to caulk and fill all of the holes and seams that were on the bookshelf. So for all of the holes, I used wood filler. If you don't want to use wood filler, you can use caulking as well to fill the holes. If you do use caulking, you don't have to sand as much. You just have to make sure that you have your water ready and are wiping down the spaces. The caulking, obviously, I caulked all of the lines that I could. I did keep the cardboard backing on my billies, so there are spots that you can't really caulk back there unless you nailed each cardboard piece to each shelf, which I didn't. So they were just kind of floating out there. So I did the sides and the tops and stuff like that. So once I caulked everything, I wood filled everything. It was again time to let everything dry. Well, the next day was scuff sand day. So there's a couple ways that you can scuff sand, but because of the material that the billies are, it's not real wood, it's not really absorbent, it's kind of plasticky. You do have to make sure that you scuff sand so that your primer and your painter can stick really well. So again, there's two ways to do it. I wood filled, so I did have to like sand them. So I went through the whole process of sanding down the wood filler and then scuff sanding all of the bookshelves. If you use caulking and you don't use the wood filler that actually has to be sanded down, then you can actually get away with a product called liquid sandpaper. I've used it a bunch of times on other projects, like when I redid my kids' furniture and stuff like that. It's really great if you're in a kind of situation where you, like an apartment or something like that, where you don't have a garage or an outside place, or you're trying to keep the dust down. Liquid sandpaper is really great. It works really well on a lot of products, and you can use it on the Billies. Now with the liquid sandpaper, just be aware, you do have to be in a space where you can open windows. You do need to use gloves because it is very toxic on your skin. But basically you just wipe this stuff on to your furniture with a rag, let it dry, and then your surface is scuffed enough to receive primer, paint, anything like that. So for me, I did it the manual way with a sanding block, and I sanded every inch of these bookcases down. You need to make sure that you do cover all of your spaces, because if you do not, then it'll make it hard for your primer to stick, and then if your primer is not sticking, it will make it hard for your paint to stick. There are a couple of spots on my bookcases where I did not do it successfully in one of those steps, which made it impossible to paint. I think I put like 3 or 4 coats on, and you could still see kind of some of the white behind it, but it's not noticeable enough unless you're really looking for it. But I would have rather not to made that mistake. So after scuff sanding everything down, it's really important that you remove all of the dust. So my family helped me. We vacuumed all of the dust out of the bookshelves, then took very lightly damp cloths and wiped everything down just to remove the dust. Once the dust was removed and everything was dry, it was time to do the primer. So for the primer, I actually used a shellac-based primer. I did a lot of research to try and find like which primer would work best for these bookcases, and it seems to be a consensus that this primer here is the best one on the market that you can buy for a project like this. So it is a shellac-based primer. It does smell really, really, really freaking bad. Make sure that you have some sort of mask or your windows open, fans going, that sort of a thing, because the smell is really bad, I'll be honest with you. But the thing works like a dream. So I primed everything. It was really difficult because the primer is white and the bookshelves are white, but they are different whites. So if you have good lighting, you'll be able to tell which parts were primed and which ones weren't. You want to make sure that you're putting on a nice even layer of it, because again, if you have a spot that's too thin, the paint will also stick too thin to that spot. When the priming was done, it had to dry. I wanted to make sure that it dried well. This project took me about a week, I'll be honest with you, because of all of the days of having to let things dry in between. I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. So I let the primer dry, and next came painting. So just a tidbit, when you are painting, if you want to get those really smooth, crisp lines, just a trick on hand is you put down your painter's tape, okay? And then you run a bead of caulking really, really thin, like I mean super paper thin, and you wipe away most of it on that seam where your painter's tape meets whatever project it is that you want to paint. You want to make sure that you're using paintable caulking, like trim and paint caulking, and you run that really thin line of it on there. Let it dry, and then start your painting. When you're done painting, you peel that away, and what it does is that caulking actually helps make a really good seam along that blue painter's tape, so you don't have all that leakage that usually comes through. We have textured walls here in the South, and it is a pain in the ass to get a crisp line with texture, so that trick has become my new favorite thing to use. So first coat of paint goes on. I decided to use cabinet and furniture paint, which is more of an oil-based paint. It's just more durable. So I decided to use that. I got the color Naval from Sherwin-Williams. I did not use the Sherwin-Williams paint because it's way more expensive. This one worked just fine, I'll be honest with you. Maybe the Sherwin-Williams a little bit better, but it was also like $20 more, so per gallon. I was already spending $60 on a gallon of paint. I wasn't trying to go for 80. For this project, I did use the gallon of paint. I probably have like 1/8 of a gallon left, not very much after the 2 coats and the touch-ups, but it's enough for touch-ups in the future, not enough for anything else. So first coat of paint goes on, and it looked like I had painted my bookshelves to look like denim. It was kind of weird. My husband thought it was cool. I thought it wasn't the style I was going for, needless to say. Next day, I continued with the second coat, and then the third day, I went through and I did touch-ups. Now, after that, obviously, I wanted to make sure that my bookshelves were completely dry before I started adding books on there, so I waited another like 30 hours from the time I finished touching up to the time I started putting on books, just to make sure that everything was dry. Now, some people do use like a polyurethane on their shelves or a furniture wax or something like that, and you can do that. I actually did a polyurethane on my IKEA hack built-in desk that I did upstairs, but I didn't like the finish of it. The polyurethane picks up very easily on your brush strokes or like your roller strokes, and it leaves that into the finish. So I wanted a more smooth finish. I might eventually try a wax, but that just, honestly, I was kind of tired. After a week of doing this, there was a lot of books scattered around my house. I couldn't access them. It was kind of rough. So I was like, maybe in time I will do the wax. Like the next time, like these are all going to end up the same way. Eventually, these shelves are gonna go scattered around the house, and I'm eventually gonna build out the wall that is behind me, but that's probably gonna be like later in the year. And there's a lot less books on these shelves to find a place for than the other side. You'll see what I mean. And so once everything was dry, it was time to put my books back on. Now, the way I organize them has a function, but it's not like fully done. Honestly, I just wanted to get stuff on the shelf. At the top shelf, I put all of like my 90s and early 2000s books, like the stuff that I saved from when I was, you know, a teen and younger. Then it went down to like witchy and vampire books and just gothic stories. Then I have my sci-fi, I have my epic fantasy, I have my Greek mythology. Then I go down to like some of my favorite series, longer series, pirates, sirens, Asian-inspired fantasies, Middle Eastern, African-inspired. Then I go down to just like your run-of-the-mill teen fantasies, things that have to do with like epic wars or historical references. I've got my dark academia. The other side, I've got romance, I've got romantasy, my contemporaries, I've got my cozy section, my historical fantasy section, and my historical fiction section. So really, it kind of covers each genre that I really like is all mixed in there. I do need to go back and kind of organize it a little bit better, maybe by author, move some stuff around. I had a friend of mine, she came over and helps just kind of figure out like which genres were what. Some subgenres were not apparent, some were obvious, so I was able to put them there, but some I really think are in the wrong spot. It's one of those things where I'm gonna have to like sit down and really deep dive when I have some time. But at that point, it was a weekend and I just wanted to get my books off of the floor because there were a lot of books on the floor. So it was kind of imperative for me to make sure that everything was off the ground. But in the end, it all came together pretty nicely. I think the shelves behind me, before I do the big reveal, the shelves behind me are the ones that I've had for forever. They're also from IKEA, but they have discontinued this line, which is why I have not continued with them. I got 5 of them, and then after I got the 5, they discontinued them, even though they had them for like 15 years, but they were really expensive, so it makes sense. I think I paid like $100 or $250 per bookshelf, which is insane comparatively to like what the Billies are. So it kind of makes sense. Still love them though. Not getting rid of them. They're just going to be rehomed to different parts of my house. But these shelves behind, they're kind of where so far I've put all of like my collections. So I've got like Carvel and Once Upon a Broken Heart, Stephanie Garber here. I've got Sarah J. Maas over there. I've got Carrie Maniscalco, we have like Rebecca Yarros, Sahara Mafi, like there's all of the ones that I collect multiple editions of have ended up on this wall. And they probably will stay there once I do this to the other side too. But I haven't decided yet how I'm gonna rearrange everything. And obviously as I add more books, things have to shift around because I have to make space for them. But without further ado, it is time to show you what the library looks like now. And here we are, my new library. Well, same library, but my new shelves, my prettified shelves, they're the same old shelves. I don't even know how. I'm gonna stick with my new library because it looks new and I'm super excited about it. So if you have any questions about how I did this or more information on the products I used, please feel free to leave a comment down below. That way I can answer any questions you may have. There are better ways of doing this, more professional ways, I guess you could say. Ways where you can add rolling ladders and that kind of stuff, which I can't do because of the structure that I have. Basically everything is particle board. I don't have any like 2x4s or anything like that. But this is the most cost-effective way of doing this built-in and the most un-DIY way. If you are not a DIYer and you're just a reader, you can still accomplish this lovely built-in Billy library without having to know how to do all of those handy things. With that being said, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you guys waiting around while I accomplished this. It was a big process. And the editing and filming of this was not easy. So again, I appreciate you guys for everything. And if you have not already subscribed, please don't forget to do so. That way you can get more bookish content from me. And if you like this video, don't forget to like it. And I will catch you guys next time. Bye.